Hello, and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. So, I hope everyone enjoyed my April Fool's Day videos. I had a lot of fun preparing them. Strangely enough, I am oddly a fan of Homelands. Maybe one of the only fans. I couldn't talk that much about the set unless I actually held some kind of fondness for it in my heart. Sometimes I love things because they're bad, or because they're, off in some way. And that's kind of true of Homelands as well. Maybe, if there's enough interest, I'll do a series on Fallen Empires at some point. But anyway. So I did a silly rare draft of Neon Dynasty for April Fools. I'd like to do a little bit more serious one this time. So, for people who are not familiar, I like to draft with a concept that I call potential. And potential asks the question, does this card win the game by itself? Better than the other cards in the pack do. And this means that I don't prioritize combat tricks, I don't prioritize removal. When you're drafting, really honing in on potential, you're trying to find individual cards that can win the game by themselves. So, Invoke Despair is an interesting rare. Sees tons of standard play. But it's 4 black pips, and 4 black pips is one heck of a commitment in Limited. You could probably get away with it in a 2 or 3 color deck if you have a ton of color fixing. You need more than a little color fixing, right? 1 Ecologist Terrarium is not enough color fixing to get to 4 black. Does it win the game by itself? Well, it can deal 6 to the opponent and draw you 3 cards. The funny thing about potential is it doesn't really pay attention to card draw, right? Potential is kind of a different axis of the game. It exists separately a bit from tempo and card advantage, concepts like that. Potential is just another way to examine a card, and it doesn't pay attention as much to those other ideas. This card by itself deals 6 to the opponent, which is helpful. It can also remove things from their board, which is helpful. But by itself, 1 Invoke Despair does not win you the game. It does have an impact on the board, it does draw you cards, it's not a bad card, but between the 4 black pips and the fact that it doesn't win the game on its own, I'm not going to take it here. It's not going to be the pick in this pack. Covert Technician. So this is a ninja, right? You can sneak it out for 2 mana potentially. When it deals combat damage to a player, you can put an artifact with mana value less than or equal to the damage from your hand to the battlefield. So most of the time, this can sneak out an artifact that costs 2 mana or less. Now, if you're in a dedicated ninja deck and some of some of your creatures are little artifacts, or you've got some little helper artifacts like the Terrarium, you could get some advantage out of this. And a 2/4 for 3 is not the worst play either. That's a good blocker. As far as winning the game, it's a 10-turn clock. If you happen to be able to do that on turn 2, then a 2/4 is not the worst attacker, but I think we can do better. Let's keep looking. Alright, Blossom Prancer. 4/4 with reach for 5. That's a pretty significant body. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 5. You may reveal a creature or enchantment. If you didn't put a card in your hand this way, like maybe if you whiff, or maybe if you're at a really low life total, you can gain 4 life instead. I really like this card. I actually have done some constructed play with this. It's much better than you think. Against aggro, you probably gain 4 life. A 4/4 reach is very relevant on the battlefield against most decks. If you don't need the life immediately, then it, draws you a card. You can build a deck to where it's all creatures and enchantments, basically. It's not that hard. Play some sagas. and you'll almost always hit when you do that. And still, in the fail case, you'll gain 4 life. This is actually a really decent card. I'd say it's basically on rate at 5 mana, right? You kind of hope to get like a 5 power thing at 5 mana, but it's got reach, which is, you know, a very nice defensive ability. I like this one better than the Technician. We'll keep looking. Alright, Automaton. Ward 2, hard to interact with when you cast an artifact spell, but a +1/+1 counter. So this could snowball out of control, and it's always good to keep an eye on a card like this, right, when you're looking at potential. If you can find a high potential card that's at a low mana value, that's really, really good. Because most high potential cards are more like this Blossom Prancer, right? A 4/4 can attack in, kill the opponent faster than a 2/4. And a 4/4 is better than a 3/3. Just in terms of the individual card that it's on, right? It's very solid. Automaton has the potential to grow, and you can get it down for 2 mana. That makes it kind of special. It needs a lot of deck synergy to make it work. It can't just be artifact tokens, they need to be artifact spells. But still, this one's in the running. I'm going to be looking at this, going to be looking at the Prancer. Alright, Subduer. It's a 3/2 for 3, par for the course. When a samurai or warrior attacks alone, tap a creature you don't control. That's a little bit of a tempo thing that it's got on it. Only being able to attack with 1 creature is kind of a disadvantage. You know, you can make a samurai deck and kind of make it work, but I don't think it's the strongest archetype in this format. So, on its own, it's a 3/2, which is, you know, very kind of vanilla. It's pretty fair at 3 mana. If it attacks by itself, we'll tap a thing. It's not the worst attacker. You know, left alone for 7 turns, it'll win the game. That'd be by turn 10. The clock on this is not as fast as the Blossom Prancer, and it has less, you know, explosive size ability than the Automaton. So even though it can tap down blockers, I'm not that impressed. Oh, this card style I got, I think, randomly, right when the season finishes, right, and you get your season rewards for, you know, your ladder play, you can get some random card styles. I think this is a random card style that I got. Lucky Offering, I think this is a little too narrow. I think it's kind of a sideboard card. Regent's Authority, I'm not big on cards that don't win the game by themselves, right? This has no potential to win the game by itself. It's just a helper piece. Protocol, no potential. Mearshell Crab, not bad. Not bad. 7 mana is a lot. It has, you know, a different way to play it, where you can counter a spell, so, you know, it's got flexibility. And if this actually hits the battlefield as a 5/7 with Ward 3, it's really difficult to interact with it. So, you know, normally you'd hope for something better at 7 mana, but the clock is not the worst. Would kill the opponent in 4 turns, you know, that'd be by turn 11. And that's not the fastest clock, right? Subduer is faster. But the Mearshell Crab can attack into boards more easily than the Subduer can, even with its tap ability. Crab's okay. It's not the best. Moon Circuit Hacker. This is neat in a ninja deck. Ninjas are more of a tempo deck than they are like a high potential deck. So drafting for a potential, not likely to get into a ninja deck. Because ninjas are kind of, you know, small and evasive and, you know, trying to be tricksy. If you can get this as a 2/1 for 1, then, you know, that's a 10-turn clock from the turn that you cast it for 1. However you manage that. you know, drawing a card or, you know, looting cards, that's useful. I mean, for a 2-mana card, this isn't bad, but just doesn't have that fast of a clock, and 1 toughness isn't impressive. Colony of Restless Shadows. I just looked at a lot of 3/3s for 5 in Homelands. So when this enters the battlefield, you choose one. You can put a creature on top of your library from your graveyard, or you can return a ninja or a rogue from your graveyard to your hand. I think if you're not in a ninja rogue deck, then this is pretty so-so. Not that exciting as a 5-mana card. Shattered States is a little bit slow, so it's kind of hard to calculate how it affects the board. So you steal something of the opponent's, which requires them to have something that you want to attack with and that's able to attack. Right? If you just take their 3/3 Defender Reach Snake just to get out of the way as a blocker, then that doesn't deal any damage. You can't depend on the damage on Chapter 1. It'll probably do something, though. Chapter 2 gives a power boost, which might be able to damage the opponent, but again, it's hard to know if that's enough of an impact to change the board state in your favor. And then Chapter 3 is a 3/3 with haste. So let's try a little bit of math here. Let's say Chapter 1, it manages to give you an extra 3 damage. Let's say Chapter 2 manages to give you an extra 2 damage. And Chapter 3 is 3 damage a turn with haste and trample. Right, so turn 5, it deals 3, turn 6, it deals 2, so that's 5 damage. Then every turn after that deals 3. Right, so you'd need another 5 turns after that to deal 15 damage. And then let's turn 6, so turn 11. Turn 11. That's okay, but it's not the best for a 5-mana play. You know, Blossom Prancer comes down, needs 5 turns of its clock to win the game. So that's turn 10. Blossom Prancer has a faster clock than the Shattered States. You know, maybe you can finagle a way to get advantage out of Shattered States. Blossom Prancer probably straight up draws you a card or gains you life. I'm not that impressed with Shattered States. Commune, this is just a helper piece. Helps you hit land or an enchantment. No potential. Ecologist Terrarium's a helper piece. Can give a permanent boost to a creature. So it has more than 0 potential. A whole deck full of terrariums wouldn't win the game because you need a creature to put it on. And its potential is pretty low. Right, so the real reason you play this card is to fix your mana and to maybe give a creature a boost or have an artifact synergy. Right, this is like a deck smoothing piece. And it's good in an artifact synergy. Good in a multicolor deck too. You know, if you play a 3, 4, 5 color deck, you can cast this on turn 2 no matter what basic lands you have, and fix your mana, at least to some degree. Okay. So I really think this comes down to the Blossom Prancer and the Automaton. Now the Automaton theoretically can go into a deck of any color, right? Because it's an artifact. And you could draft up a deck full of artifacts in any color combination, but in practice, I think some colors are going to have more artifacts than others, right? I think blue-red and blue-black are more artifact-y combinations, or maybe red-black. Right, red-black has the Anvil. No, that's probably one of the stronger combos. Blue also tends to traditionally have a lot of interaction with artifacts. It does in this set as well. And then white and green a little less so. There is a theme in this set where if you control an artifact and an enchantment both, then an effect occurs. So, yeah, if we end up into a kind of a middling deck, there's actually a path to take for that as well. So all of the colors do a little bit of something with artifacts in this set, I believe. But Patchwork Automaton might be angling more towards, red plus something else. Blossom Prancer is just kind of a generally solid card. Doesn't really lock you into an archetype. So this one doesn't lock you into a color as much, this one doesn't lock you into an archetype as much. Normally I say to take the cheaper card mana-wise with the higher potential. I'm really torn here, though, because I really, really like Blossom Prancer. I think it's an excellent card. I think if I'm going to follow my own advice, though, I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to take this Patchwork Automaton and see if I can't make an artifact deck here. Okay. Life of Toshiro. This isn't bad. So the turn you play this, it's an extra 2 damage. And the following turn, right, you can give a creature +2/+2. So you can count that as potential damage that this is dealing. You can also clear out blockers or gaining life. It's flexible. Then it turns into a 2/3, which can give you mana for instants and sorcery, so... Overall, this is kind of like a 2/2 with haste in terms of the clock that it provides you. Those first couple of boosts are pretty nice. And, punch through board states that you might not have been able to attack in. And a 2/2 with haste for 2 would have a 10-turn clock, which would be turn 11. Really, for 2 mana, this is pretty strong. It's not the worst. We could probably do better, but this is not bad at all. Okay, go Shintai. This is a shrine. Beginning of the end step, can pay 1, deals X damage to a player or a planeswalker, where X is the number of shrines. So in terms of how much damage this card can deal on its own, it's kind of like a 3/3. And some of that damage doesn't require combat, which is nice. First Strike is also a little bit unusual. That's an interesting ability. And if you get out more shrines, then this damage increases. It does tax you mana, but not very much. So you can afford to play around it. Probably still make use of it. This is not bad on its own. I think it's about fair on its own. I think if you get, another shrine into play, then it becomes above rate. At that point, it starts dealing 2 to the opponent every turn. Yeah, I'll rate this as fair on its own. Gloom Shrieker, 2/1 Menace, kind of hard to block. When it enters the battlefield, you get a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, so it can give you some card advantage. If you would die, exile it instead. I don't love that line of text, but it's okay. Definitely keeps it from being an Eternal Witness. Overall, this card's alright. 2 power, hard to block, gets you a card, it's fine. It's not exciting from the standpoint of potential, but it's fine. Rito Sentinel. So this has Defender, right? So it can't win the game with combat damage, but there's another aspect of this card. Maybe a lot of people don't know you can draft this archetype in this format. You can draft a mill deck. It requires a bunch of Rito Sentinels, and it would be helpful if you get the Blue Shrine. The Blue Shrine is also an uncommon that mills the opponent. But this is limited, right? This is a format where you have a 40-card deck. Rito Sentinels are not very highly chosen as cards in this format. There's a very real possibility this could table all the way back around to us. And I've gotten, you know, like 4 or 5 Rito Sentinels in a deck before, along with blue cards to, you know, search them up, fetch them up. Right, like the one that lets you look at your top 7, you pick up the 2 artifacts from among them. And, you know, 3/3 Defender is a very real presence on the board to keep yourself alive. It's a little silly, but it can help you towards a mill win. So, in terms of that, the clock is slow. But we could pick this up, maybe, if this wheels back. Could be interesting. I'm not going to take it right here, though. Exemplar, this can be a 3-power creature for 2, at the cost of, you know, only one of your creatures can attack. But that would be a pretty fast clock. You know, 7 turns, attacks as a 3/2, win by turn 9. For a 2-mana creature, that's not the worst. It's alright. Mothrider Patrol, very low potential. Tapping stuff could be nice, but it costs a lot of mana. And it has a really slow clock. Not impressed. Moonsnare Specialist, this is more of a tempo play, right? It's a ninja, can bounce a creature back to its owner's hand. Still, it's just a 2/2 for either 3 or 4. Very low potential. Reckoner's Bargain, no potential. I like the card. Think it's cool, but no potential. Voltage Surge, no potential. Heir of the Ancient Fang, if you have a modified deck, this could be a 3/4 for 3 mana, and that is slightly above rate, right? Like a 3/3 for 3 I'd call on rate. A 3/4 is very slightly above rate, but only slightly. And you really, this card's, you know, incredibly mediocre as a 2/3 for 3. It's quite good as a 3/4 for 3. That can attack past, like, you know, the snake with Defender and Reach. That's very commonly played in this format for 2. Patchwork is potentially something that might be modified, so, you know, it's not impossible that the heir could go with it. I think it's a little early to take it here. Network Terminal. This would, you know, be an artifact synergy. Can give us, you know, draw a discard to, you know, cycle through lands and stuff we don't need. Fixes our mana. So if we make a, you know, multicolor deck, could be very nice. It's got no potential on its own. I like it for synergy, though. Searchlight Companion. So this is 2 power for 3 mana. A little bit below rate in terms of its potential. Puts it on 2 bodies, one of them flies. Yeah, it's not the worst. It's not the worst, it's at least half evasive. Comes with a chump blocker. As an artifact creature, would pump the automaton and actually create board presence. Okay. So, if I want to turn on this Patchwork Automaton, I'm going to have to take some artifacts. Now, there are some colored artifacts, right? We can keep an eye out for those. These are enchantment creatures in this case. I think it's a little early to take the Sentinel here. Rather take something that can attack right now, see if the Sentinel will wheel back to us. I'm going to take the Searchlight Companion. I don't think it's the best card in this pack or anything, but I like it in combination with the Automaton. So I'm really going out on a limb for some synergies here. Okay, Anchor to Reality could work if we get like some big vehicles, like there's a Thundersteel Colossus. But I'd like to wait maybe until I get a Thundersteel Colossus, or a big piece of equipment, before I want to take this Anchor to Reality. Sorry, Captain's not the worst. With haste, it's got a pretty reasonable clock. It's only 4 more turns of damage after the turn it attacks and comes down. So that's 20 damage by turn 8. That's pretty good. And it gives a power boost if a samurai or warrior attacks alone. So on its own, it would be at least 5 power. That would lower the clock even less. Alright, so it'd be 5 on turn 5. Then, yeah, turn 8. Turn 8 would be 20 damage if they didn't have a blocker. It's actually pretty high potential. This isn't bad at all. Wish it had more toughness, but haste means might be able to sneak in when they don't expect it. It does seem like this is kind of a defensive format. Ooh, another Patchwork Automaton. Okay, that's probably the take out of this pack. We'll keep looking, but if I'm going all in on this Patchwork Automaton theme, the second one's like a no-brainer. Okay. These are okay. Armguard Familiar, if the Automaton wasn't here, I would look at this Familiar, right? 2-1 for 2 is not that exciting, but as a piece of equipment that can boost another creature by 2/2/1 and ward 2. This could grow one of your creatures out of range, or you could go, put it on a flyer, like the Searchlight Companion, start swinging in for 3 in the air. Or you can make an Automaton that's enormous on the ground and impossible to block except with chumps. So I think for a 2-mana play, this is actually pretty good in an artifact deck. The Guardians. So this can help your modified creatures attack as though they didn't have Defender, which can help itself if you modify it, like with a piece of equipment or a counter. So, no potential on its own, but if you turn it on, then a 3/4 for 3 is above right. So, if you can do the synergy, this is alright. Let's see. Low potential. Shrinks a creature, it can't block, and then they lose 1 life every upkeep. So it's a very slow clock on its own, but it could help you get in for an attack. So, low potential, but it's okay. Peerless Samurai. 2/3 with Menace for 3 is okay. Just kind of seems like a helper piece in the Samurai deck. Eh. Bamboo Grove Archer. So this has no potential on its own, but it's a fantastic synergy piece, right? You don't just have to play it in an enchantment deck. A 3/3 Defender Reach for 2 mana blocks up the ground, and that can help you get to a late game where you start casting cards like Asari Captain. Just don't worry about the early game if you have some cards like this, and you just build up your mana and resources and go to the late game. Alright, Tales of Master Sashiro. This is pretty good. To make the math really nice on this card, you want to have a creature to put the counters on. But it gives, chapters 1 and 2, +1/+1 counter on a creature or vehicle, gains vigilance, so it can help you attack and block. As long as you're putting those to work, right, then it's 1 damage on turn 5, another 2 damage on turn 6 from the 2/+1 counters. Then on turn 7, you've dealt 3 damage with this so far, not including the creature it's on. So as long as there's a creature, what's a reasonable assumption here? Let's say you can reasonably put this on, like, I don't know, a 2-power flyer or a 2-power thing on the ground. So we'll assume a 2-power creature here. So, because otherwise the math's not very good. So that'd be 3 damage on turn 5, then 4 damage on turn 6, right? So that'd be 9. Then you still have, your 4/4. Then you get this 5/5 Vigilance Haste that can attack with the 4/4. So you've dealt 9, you deal another 9 on turn 7. That's 18 damage. Then turn 8, Overkill, win the game. if you have something to put the counters on and attack in with, Tales of Master Seshiro is pretty incredibly good. But if you don't, alright, if you, let's say, play it on an empty board, then you get this 5/5 haste on turn 7, and then that's like a turn 10 win if there's, you know, nothing across the board from you. Which isn't terrible, but it's also not amazing. Overall, I think this is a really good card. Okay. See, I think for me this would be between like the Tails, the Armguard Familiar, and the Automaton. I'm going to take the Automaton here because we're going to try something funky. Okay. Anchor to Reality, these go around really late. They're very good with Thundersteel Colossus. But if you don't get the Thundersteel Colossus or some, you know, like rare, neat piece of equipment or vehicle, something really good to fetch out, then it's kind of so-so. I don't think you take it hoping that you'll hit that synergy. Azusa's Many Journeys is just a generally good card. Get an extra land drop, gain 3 life, get a 3/3 that might have some upside. In terms of a clock, you get a 3/3 on turn 4. Then it would be 7 turns to win the game from there. So that'd be turn 11, which, you know, that's not bad for a 2-mana thing. Getting a 3/3 with a 2-mana thing is not the worst. Plus you got, you know, a land drop and life. If you had any enchantment synergy, maybe that does something for you. Perhaps occasionally it gets blocked and untaps lands and you can use the mana. Overall, I think for the mana cost, this is a fine card. It has no synergy with our deck currently. We'll keep looking. Gloom Shrieker is just kind of generally, you know, nice. Moonsnare Prototype, this would be another artifact. It can, you know, make mana. Can also be channeled for 5, discard it, and the owner of a non-land permanent puts it on top or bottom of their library. That is a 1-for-1 exchange in terms of card advantage, so that's not terrible. So late game it's removal, early game it's a mana accelerant. That's not the worst. It has no potential, but it's okay. Low potential, decent. I wouldn't mind playing Kami of Terrible Secrets at all. 3 power on turn 4. It's got about the same potential as Azusa's Many Journeys. Could draw you a card and gain you a life. Definitely got the artifact part going. Maybe not the enchantments. Undercity Scrounger. The treasure is nice. Potential is very low. It's kind of just a blocker. Kami of Industry is pretty so-so. You know, 6 toughness is useful. Makes it a better attacker. Maybe you get an artifact card back. That could be nice for us. It doesn't count as casting an artifact, though. It just returns it. And then it gets sacrificed at the next end step. Yeah, it's okay. No potential. Low potential. Does better work as a mana accelerant. Either make, you know, a little mana creature, or it can buff a creature up larger and tap for 2 green. It's okay. Grafted Growth. Low potential, it does distribute a +1 counter. So that's something. Windscarred Crag. The potential in this pack is not that high. I'm not terribly impressed with the artifacts I'm seeing. I think maybe I take Azusa's Many Journeys here. I like to take high potential cards with a low mana cost. getting a 3/3 for 2, even if it's a couple of turns late, could be handy. You know, I'm definitely not married to going into green, not attached to it or anything, but take it here, see what happens. Ooh, Goshintai have lost wisdom. Okay. So, this is a difficult calculation because this is a mill win. The clock is very slow if you don't have another shrine. Right? Beginning of your end step, you can pay 1, which you can't do on turn 2. Right? So you can only start calculating this mill by turn 3. You have to have mana open. When you do, player mills X cards, or X is the number of shrines. If this is your only shrine, then they would mill 1 card a turn starting turn 3. Turn 3, let's say they've seen 10 cards, right? 7 card opening hand, they've drawn 3 cards. Then you mill them a card on turn 3. That's 11. Then they're going to see at least 2 cards a turn for the rest of the game. Now, realistically, the opponent's probably going to draw some cards. Right? The modern Magic cards have draw a card attached to them. There are so many cantrips that exist. Nowadays, there's also, looters and rummagers, and, discard and draw. Sorry about that. Stuff like this Aki Ronin. There are lots of ways to draw and discard. Or discard and draw. But if we ignore that, we'll say, okay, 2 cards a turn, starting from turn 3, right? They draw a card, they mill a card. Do this every turn. They're 11 cards deep. They have 29 cards left in their library. So at that point, you need 15 turns to mill them out from turn 3. And that would be winning by turn 18. On its own, it's very slow. If you have another shrine, and you prioritize this shrine with your mana, right? You always make sure you're hitting the mill triggers. At 2 mill triggers, right? So then turn 3, they're at 12 cards. Well, no, I think reasonably, there are some other 2 mana shrines. There's like a green shrine that's 2 mana. Okay, this is not impossible. You could do it turn 3. 12 cards deep on turn 3. Start doing 3 cards a turn. 2 from this, plus their draw every turn. I have 28 cards left. 3 cards a turn. That would take, let's see, 9 turns would get you through 27 cards to where they'd have 1 card left. It'd be reasonable to assume they had some kind of rummage or card draw or something over the course of all of those turns. I think that's a reasonable assumption. From 1 card left. So 9 turns from turn 3 would be a turn 12 kill, which is not fast per se. But it's something you could do. And then once you take this card, and once you are looking at the mill win, you can start looking at those 3/3 defenders, right, that mill 3 cards. That's taking like a turn off the clock, or maybe, a turn and a half off the clock, depending on how slow you're going. At the same time, that, was it Rito Sentinel? You can also put cards from your graveyard on the bottom of your library, so if you're grinding out a really long game, you're going to make certain that you don't mill, and you're going to make certain that the opponent does mill. It's slow, but every one of those Rito Sentinels takes like, a turn or a turn and a half kind of off the clock as you're playing out over the course of the game. So while the Rito Sentinel has an incredibly slow clock on its own, once you start to combo it up with these other pieces, you could get it down to a reasonable clock. It's silly, and I don't know if I recommend doing it. The deck's hard to put together, requires uncommons, but there you have it. it could be done. So, Go Shintai. Very low potential on its own. Starts to be pretty good at the point that you have 3 or more shrines. Red Side Reliquary, no potential. It's just kind of a useful helper piece land in this format. Does see some standard play as well. It's just kind of generally nice as a colorless land. It can draw cards. Ancestral Katana, this would at least give us a piece of equipment, which is not useless in terms of potential. You can't have too much, right? A deck full of equipment has nothing to equip, and then you lose the game. But if you're very sparing with your equipment, if you have 1 or 2 in the deck, then you can treat this as, you know, having 2 power for the upfront investment of 2 and then 3, or less if you have a Samurai or Warrior. So it's better in the Samurai Warrior deck. In that deck where you get it down for a total of 3 mana, it's kind of like a 2 power creature with haste. It also makes your other creatures hard to deal with in combat, which makes them hard to block, which means they're more likely to get through for combat damage. That's important. Now, you're not just against a fishbowl, you're against a live opponent with blockers. So making your creatures in some way more difficult to block or impossible to block, that is always helpful for potential. I'd say this card is fair. I think it's pretty fair. You know, not amazing or anything, but I wouldn't be embarrassed to run it in this deck. Okay, so this can be a +1 counter for 1 mana, or return a permanent you control to its owner's hand, so it can either kind of be like a trick or card disadvantage. Card advantage. Right? You save a creature of yours from a removal spell, maybe you get its enters the battlefield trigger again. Or the +1 counter kind of makes this like a 1/1 with haste. That's harder to deal with because you've made a creature bigger, so it's harder to block. So it has low potential, but not none. It's okay. It's a permanent trick. Mirror Shell Crab, it's alright. Not that exciting at 7 mana, but it's flexible. You could counter a spell or ability. Planar Incision, pretty low potential. Right, you either save your creature from a removal spell or re-trigger its enters the battlefield trigger, gets a +1 counter on it, which, you know, kind of makes this like a 1 power with haste, kind of like the Light the Way, and the creature's harder to block in combat. Again, not the worst. It's okay. Has some potential. Short Circuit, no potential. Sky Swimmer Koi, actually pretty decent. 3/3 flyer for 4 is, I'd say above rate. Right, normally you'd think of like a 4/4 on the ground. 4 power creature on the ground as being about fair at 4 mana. 3/3 on the ground is, you know, a little below rate, but you play it anyway. A 3/3 flyer is quite nice. And this one says whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you can draw a card and then discard. We do have some artifacts here. So I'm thinking Sky Swimmer Koi might actually be the choice here. Aki Ronin, low potential, right? Just 1 power. It's not useless. It does things for you, but it's low potential. Coiling Stalker. So if you get this to connect with the opponent and put a counter on a creature that doesn't have a counter, such as itself, then you've gotten 3 powers worth of stuff for 2 mana, and that is really good. Right, at 2 mana, getting 3 powers worth of stuff is really good. It's a nice deal at 2 mana. Not amazing, but good. If it doesn't connect with the opponent, it's kind of a train wreck, and it's got really low potential as a 2/1. So, you really need it to connect, but as long as it connects, then it's above rate. Right? It's like a 3/2, but it can be spread over more than one card. And there's the possibility, maybe, that you can do this more than once. If you ever manage to get it to connect with the opponent a second time, then it's way above rate. Right? Getting 4 power for 2 is just amazing. It's ridiculous. So if you can pull that off, then you definitely want it. You gotta jump through some hoops to do it, though. So yeah, I think for this deck that I'm looking at, I think I take the Sky Swimmer Koi. It's got nice artifact synergies, and a 3/3 flyer for 4 is just good. Right? I like the idea of the mill win. I think it's cute. But I'm going to be a little bit more serious, at least for now. These automatons want to win with damage. I'm going to take the Sky Swimmer Koi. Naturalist is good, but that's kind of not the direction we're leaning. The only enchantment so far is Zeus's Many Journeys. This would be a pretty hard pivot at this point. Lifelink helps you win a damage race, but still the clock is not that fast on its own. It's what it can do for your other enchantments. And that's calculating tempo and synergy at that point rather than the potential of this card. Now that's once you've decided to make an enchantment deck, then you take this for the synergy and the tempo that it creates, not its own individual potential. And it buffs up the potential of your other cards. Quickens their clocks by coming down faster. Low potential, very middling. 3/5 for 5 is, Ironroot Treefolk. That's okay and limited. It's not anything exciting, but it is an artifact. Triggers the automaton. Triggers the Sky Swimmer Koi. Can also be channeled for 4. Tap 2 creatures you don't control, and they don't untap during the controller's next untap step. That's an instant speed. So it's it's this 3/5 body for 5, which is a little below rate, attached to a tempo play, which, I don't love a tempo play, but I love flexibility on a card. The two parts of it added together might make it a take, might make it okay in this deck. I'm not excited about it, but I would run it, I think. I think it's playable. Short Circuit, no potential. Chainful Centipede. So this is an artifact creature. It's also equipment. Whenever this or the thing it's attached to attacks, gets +2/+0 till end of turn. So this on its own is a 4/2, which is a fast clock at 3 mana, right? That's actually above rate in terms of just killing the opponent if they don't block. That would be 5 turns from turn 3. That'd be turn 8. Turn 8 as a kill. That would be above rate for a 3-drop. And then you can equip it for 2, or unequip it for 2. And make another one of your creatures. Much more dangerous, hard to deal with, and if that creature dies, then you get this creature back, which is like an above rate 3/3. 3 mana, 4/2, when it's attacking. Not the best blocker, not the best when you're behind, but pretty good, I think. Pretty good. I could take the Cyber Trespassers if I just want to stay in blue for a minute, but I think this Centipede is actually a higher potential card. Infiltrator's okay. So, at the cost of your tempo, right? You can sink your mana into this thing, buff up its potential to win the game. So, turn 3, it attacks for 1. Then starting turn 4, it could start attacking for 3 every turn. So you get in 1. Then over the next 6 turns, you get in another 18. Alright, so it's 1 on 3, Then by turn 9, you've dealt 19 damage to the opponent. If you manage to hit 8 mana in the meantime, then you take a turn off the clock, win the game, faster. So on its own, this would be about a turn 10 or turn 9 win at the cost of all of your mana from turn 4 onwards. Which, if you get an aggressive enough start and they just can't find a flying blocker, maybe. It's not the worst. It's okay. Kato's Pursuit, no potential. Simian Sling. Actually, I kind of like this guy as equipment, not so much as a 1/1 monkey. But as equipment, you make something else hard to deal with. When it becomes blocked, deals damage to the defending player. That's nice, even if they have like token creatures, right? Like the White Shrine puts out token creatures every turn. You've got a Simian Sling on your best attacker. Even if it's getting chump blocked, the opponent keeps taking 1 to the face. And the +1/+1 makes your creature harder to, block and deal with. So this represents 2 damage a turn. You can stick it on another one of your creatures to make it hard to deal with, and actually this is not bad at all. Not bad at all. Comes with all the bonuses of being a piece of equipment, and then if the creature dies, you got this 1/1 monkey still. And then, maybe the next turn you could make a go wide attack, if that would win you the game. For a 1 mana card, I think this is actually pretty good. Safekeeping, no potential, Tranquil Cove, okay. Yeah, man, I want my artifact synergies. I think I take the Chainflail Centipede here. I think I do. Sling wouldn't be bad either. But, I'm gonna go with the, larger board impact card for now. See where it takes me. Okay, Invigorating Hot Spring. This one's hard to calculate. So let's say you get this right on turn 3. Turn 2, you got like, I don't know, a 2/2. You put a counter on it, and that counter acts like, a 1/1 with haste in terms of the damage the Hot Spring deals. So we'll try not to calculate for the 2/2 and its combat damage math. Maybe it gets blocked and killed. But we'll treat the counters from this as haste. Turn 4, you can play a 4-drop. Alright, maybe it's got 3 or 4 power. Get that in with haste. Then you've taken a turn off the clock of that card, plus you've pumped it up by 1. Then you could do it again on turn 5. Actually, you need creatures to pair this with, which is not always a sure thing. And you can top deck it at a point where you don't have something good to stick it on, but the explosive potential of this card, I think, is through the roof. I think the things it can do for combat math to win the game quickly, all that haste and power it's distributing, gosh, I think this is an incredibly powerful card, really and truly. We're not married to black-white. Black-blue yet. Do have a green card. It's not impossible we could take this. Would be a strange pivot here. Green and red look somewhat open, especially seeing this pick this late. Might be interesting. Might be interesting. So, Katana's fair, but not exciting. Mnemonic Sphere, this has no potential, but it synergizes really nicely with our cards. It's an artifact, draws us into more artifacts. Pretty cool. Spell Pierce, no potential. Bargain, no potential. Ogre, pretty high potential. 4 power for 3. That is a 5-turn clock on its own. 1 toughness means it's not very likely to do that. It does make a creature unable to block when it first comes down. I think this is okay. I think this is either on rate or slightly above rate as a 3-drop goes. 4 power is definitely threatening. Low potential. Low potential, it's a little bit harder to block, which is nice. But still, in terms of a clock, it's, 10 turns. Jungle Hollow. Okay. So this is between the Ogre, which would be our first red card, and I don't think it's that good of a red card. The Mnemonic Sphere, or the Invigorating Hot Spring. I think I take the Hot Spring here just because the upside is so crazy. Also gives other modified creatures haste, even if you don't put a counter on them. Right? If they're modified for some other reason, like you equip them, or they come with their own counters, have haste. Yeah, this might not make the cut, but I'm going to take it. See what happens. Okay, Enormous Energy Blade. This one's not that exciting. So, when you put it on a creature, the creature taps. So unless you have a way to untap the creature, you actually can't attack with it the turn you equip it. So, maybe, I think it would be terrible as, play this turn 3, equip it turn 4. I think it'd be pretty terrible. But maybe on turn 5, right? If you have 5 mana, you have nothing really better to do. You play this and equip it to something that's either hard to block or, is like a 1/1 spirit or something that your opponent's not very happy about blocking. It gets tapped down, then the next turn, suddenly you've got this fast clock on the opponent. It's not the worst in terms of potential. But you just can't attack with it the same turn, and it's mana intensive. And it's terrible when you're behind. When you're behind, it's just like the worst. Not useless. Not useless by any means, but would not prioritize it highly at all. Anvil, on the other hand, is quite exciting. Got a little bit of artifact synergy stuff going on. Anvil's great. Coming this late, maybe that means black-red is open. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that black and red individually are open. Just that no one's in black and red. Still, the math works out pretty nicely on this, so if you could play it on turn 2 and actually sack like a 1-drop artifact, then you drain the opponent 1, make a 1-power thing. Then if you can get out another artifact, sacrifice it on turn 3, drain the opponent for 1, attack for 1. Now they're taking 3 total. Now you have 2 1/1s. Let's say you can't keep sacrificing new artifacts after that point. Maybe you have to keep sacrificing one of those 2 after that point. That means every turn you've got another 2 combat damage plus a drain. So it would represent 3 damage every turn, plus more if you introduce new artifacts to sacrifice. If one of them gets blocked and it wouldn't trade in combat, you can sack it with the anvil to do the drain. The math works out pretty nicely with Oni Cold Anvil, especially as a 2-mana card. Really, really quite good. I think you value it at least as much as like a 3/3 for 2, in terms of potential. You just need the synergies for it. Cyber Trespassers, unexciting, playable. No potential. No potential unless you have enough high-power creatures to attack with that this would be lethal the turn you cast it. So you need enough unblocked creatures coming through that this would be lethal in order for it to win the game by itself. Which could happen in an aggressive deck, but then it's kind of more of a tempo play. On its own, I would say no. No potential. If you know you have that aggressive aggro tempo deck, then, you know, changes the math on this a bit. Bearer of Memory, certainly not the worst. It's a 3/2 for 3, which is par for the course, but then turn 6, it can start growing itself or something else. Alright, so turns 4 and 5, it can get in for 6 damage, but then it gets in for 4 damage on turn 6. So that's 10. Then 15 on turn 7. Right, another 5. Then 21 on turn 8. So Bearer of Memory by itself is kind of like a turn 8 clock. For a 3-drop, it's pretty good. Mana intensive at the point that you've got 6 or more mana. And you might not necessarily hit 6 mana on time, but this card is it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Dramatis Puppet. 2/4 for 4, pretty forgettable. Enters the battlefield. For each kind of counter on a permanent, you can put another counter on it or remove one from it. You all should remember this one for constructed applications. This can remove a counter from a permanent. I kind of forgot this card existed. So if you have the rare land, I forget what it's called. Comes in with a counter, you can build up more counters on it, sacrifice it to destroy permanents with manic value equal to that number of counters. You could play a Dramatis Puppet, remove a counter from that land, and blow up tokens. You can also remove the counters from that land using the new Galissa. When she hits, she can remove up to 3 counters from something. I forgot about Dramatis Puppet, though. So if this comes down and puts a +1 counter on one of your things, like the Automaton, then, you know, you got kind of like 3 power and 5 toughness for 4 mana. At that point, that's about on rate. Right? 3/5 for 4. It's pretty good. Better than the Trespassers. But if you don't have that synergy, a 2/4 for 4 would be pretty bad. Okay, in terms of pure potential upside, I think the only Cold Anvil's the take here. Right, early in the draft, you kind of take some good cards, sort out your colors along the way. Okay, we've got the Crab. Kami's not that great. The only cards with potential, well, to speak of, are the Crab and the Kami. The Crab has more potential than the Kami. I think it's a slightly faster clock, and it is much harder to stop in combat than a 3/3. There's also a College's Terrarium, and this one is a synergy play. And it doesn't have 0 potential. It can put a counter on a creature. And sacrificing it could trigger the Anvil. So this can smooth out our mana. It's an artifact to play with the Automaton, which is nice. And then it can put a counter on a thing. That has some potential on its own, and it could synergize with the Anvil as an artifact that leaves the battlefield. So I think this is between the Terrarium and the Crab. I I think I like the terrarium better. We've picked a lot of different colors of cards right now. If we know we have some terrariums, we might be able to play a 3-color deck. Might be able to play a 4-color deck. We'll take the terrarium. There's that Sentinel. I thought it might come back to us. Ooh, the Terminal's here too. Terminal's here too. And we've got the air. So this can modify things. This can modify things. This can be modified. This can modify things. Actually, the air is not the worst. The air is not the worst here. There's a real possibility this could be a 3-4 in our deck. Puts it above rate. I would love to take one of these artifacts. This one has no potential unless either we get a mill win, or we get the blue creature that can let our defenders attack if they're modified. Which is not impossible. We could pick up that card. And since we have a lot of modification, that card also wouldn't be that bad. It's a 3-4 for 3. Modify it, you know, put some equipment on it. So the Sentinel could work. It could. Terminal smooths out the draws and the mana. It's just, you know, a very helpful piece for the deck. You can sack it to the anvil. Grows the automatons. That's not bad. But I have not often played with this card, and I think if there's a deck to try it in, then this is maybe it. I love taking Sentinels, but I'm going to take the air here. See if maybe it'll work for us. Okay. Bamboo Grove Archer is an amazing card, but the Familiar has some potential on its own, and it makes the potential of your other creatures better, and it's an artifact. I think we definitely take the Familiar here. I'm not excited at all about this Samurai. Okay. So we could take a big body that might get an artifact back as a one-shot thing. Which, you know, would actually be pretty good with a terrarium, right? Sacrifice it, get it back, find another land, put a counter on something, that wouldn't be too bad. There's this Moonsnare prototype. It can be an expensive removal spell, it can be early mana acceleration that's only colorless. Also, you know, fodder for the anvil. Still don't have a good thing for the anchor. We do have a little bit of equipment now. I've got the Chainflail Centipede and the Familiar. So this isn't a dead card to us right at this moment. And sacking artifacts or creatures is a thing we could do, especially in an anvil deck. This card is starting to look a little better, but it doesn't look that good. We don't have a really amazing target to fetch with it yet. And these go very late in the draft. So, it's not time yet. And Grafted Growth, I'm just not that excited about. Yeah, I think this is between the Kami and the Moonsnare prototype. Kami has potential on its own. And while a 3-6 for 5 is a little below rate, if, for example, it came down and got a +1 counter from the Invigorating Hot Spring, then a 4-7 with haste for 5 would actually be pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and take it here. Okay, so I don't have any white cards yet. Between a weak removal and a planar incision, I'm going to take the planar incision, I think. It can make a creature bigger, it can dodge removal, can give us an enters the battlefield trigger. I think it's the more interesting card. Okay, between these two, I think I take the short circuit. Help win a damage race with the opponent, make something lose flying and power. Might not make the cut. Spell Pierce, I'm going to take it to the sideboard. Kyrie, you say? 6/6 flying ward 3 for 6. Well, in 3 attacks it deals 18 damage to the opponent. So by turn 9, the opponent's taken 18 from Kyrie. It's technically a 4-turn clock on its own, right? 18 doesn't quite do it with a fishbowl. So that would be turn 10 as a win. But turn 9, if you've dealt 2 damage to the opponent, and a gigantic flyer like this is very hard to stop. This one's hard to target because of the ward. Pretty likely to close out the game, and if it dies, you can return. Let's see. Non-land permanents, total mana value 6 or less to their owner's hands. So that would kind of mostly be a tempo play, probably, where you bounce the opponent's board. You could also do a value play where you rebounce something of your own in order to recast it for some kind of benefit. Or you can mill 6 cards, return 2 instant or sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand. We are not looking like a deck that's got a lot of instants and sorceries, but that just means I probably would never choose the second option. Don't get that much value out of a mill. Would rather just bounce some stuff when this dies. And a 6/6 flyer for 6. With Ward 3, I don't know if you can turn that down in Limited. Well, let's keep looking. Ooh, Behold the Unspeakable. Okay, if Kyrie wasn't in the pack, this one would be good. So, first chapter reduces some damage against you, and maybe you can attack in because creatures you don't control are less able to, block and trade in combat. Chapter 2 gets you some card advantage. Chapter 3 is a flying trampler that could be pretty big. You just drew some cards on Chapter 2, so might be pretty big on Chapter 3. You might choose to stop playing lands out of your hand and just make the Vision of the Unspeakable bigger. A flying trampler that keeps growing is a very likely card to win the game for you. Even though it doesn't turn into it till turn 7, it might not take very many hits to kill the opponent. You might be looking at a turn 10 win. That's pretty good at 5 mana. Yeah, I think this card's just good, generally speaking, especially in Limited. Gravelighter's okay. It's a little tricky to use, though. Right? If a creature's already died, then the Gravelighter doesn't do the each player sacrifices a creature. Sometimes that'll trip you up. Right? If you were expecting each player to sacrifice a creature and you draw a card and you're like, wait a minute, why am I drawing a card? Oh crap. Just have to pay attention. 2/2 flyer for 3's fine. Historian's Wisdom's pretty bad. +2/+1. It's kind of like 2 power with haste for 3. Might draw you a card. Might help the creature get through, but it's also card disadvantage if the opponent points a removal spell at your creature. I don't like it. Not for us. Not the worst. Kind of a 3 power flyer. Eats into the potential of one of your other creatures, but it could be a really bad creature, like a token. We're not in white, though. Not in white, so I'm going to kind of skip the white cards. Puzzle Maker has low potential. It is a great blocker in this format, though. It is a really good blocker in this format. It's also pretty good for ninjas. No, no, maybe. Ooh. High potential. So, if Kyrie and Behold the Unspeakable weren't in this pack, I would be really tempted to take the Colossus here. And then, you can pick up some of those blue sorceries really late in a draft, those uncommons, which can fetch a Colossus straight into play by sacking an artifact or creature. It comes down with Trample and Haste, accrues up for only 2 power. That's a great combination, but in this case, I'm gonna take Kyrie. Okay, low potential. Might, maybe, if the wind's blowing right, make you a 2/2 Samurai. It's not a bad spell, though. Norika Yamazaki. She's fine. Card advantage. 3/2 Vigilance. She's fine. She's fair. 3 mana, as potential goes. Historian's Wisdom. Yeah. White cards, kind of skippable. This one turns into a first striker. That's interesting. Because first strikers are becoming less and less common. Futurist Sentinel. Oh, that was a big body for the mana cost. Yeah, 6/6 for 4. Takes a crew 3, but it's so hard to stop in combat, I think it might be worth it. Yeah, it eats into the potential of one or the other creatures, but it's great for blocking. Vehicles are really good for blocking. Right, they go to remove one of your creatures, you tap it to crew up the vehicle instead. Now they've got another blocker in their way. Reckoner Bankbuster does that all the time in Constructed. Man, this is quite a clock. Quite a clock, and it's an artifact. If it goes well in our deck. Yeah. Very low potential. High, actually. Ironhoof Boar. This is good. 5 power, Trample Haste for 6. So, gets in for 5 on turn 6, and then 3 more turns wins the game. So it's a turn 9 win as a 6-drop. It's hard to block in combat, and it even has the flexibility to be a combat trick. I like it much better as the creature, though. I think this is good. Yeah, I think this is good. I think the Sentinel's an even faster clock. Really impressed by the Sentinel. I think this boar is good, though. If the Sentinel wasn't here, I'd be taking the boar. Okay, Jukai Preserver. Represents 4 power and toughness. Or you could channel it at instant speed to distribute 2 power and toughness as like a trick. It's permanent. This is fair. This is on rate. Completely fair card. Would work in our deck because it would modify itself or something else. The clock is not as amazing as this Sentinel, though. Puppet, Iron Apprentice, Decoy, Yeah, Future Sentinel, let's go. Unforgiving one. That's pretty forgettable. There are a lot of modified creatures potentially in this deck, so this is not the worst. It's very mediocre though. Shrine. Again, I think this shrine is fine on its own. Becomes above rate if you have another shrine. Azusa's. I think it's very good for the mana cost. Skipping white. We'll say Imperial Oath is just fine for 6. 6 power, 6 toughness, vigilance, scry 3 is just fine for 6 mana. Okay, Crab. It's not the worst, a little slow. Ooh, the koi. Yeah, the koi. Probably the koi. No potential, low potential. Nice card advantage. No potential, though. And Brute Suit. So this is above rate. Vehicles generally are. Eats into the potential of one of your other creatures, and this one is not quite as amazingly impactful on the board as the Futurist Sentinel. 4/3 Vigilance is big. It is a big deal. It is hard to stop. But yeah, I think the Koi flying synergizes well. Okay, we got Acquisition Octopus. Forgettable in terms of potential, but it is an artifact. And it is a piece of equipment which can modify things. And it could draw us cards. So this doesn't hit up the potential angle, it does hit up like synergy and card advantage, though. So that's not terrible. It'd be a 3-drop. Well, yeah, we could use a 3-drop. Wouldn't be the worst. Reality Heist. Ooh. These go around kind of late, but man, I think this is going to be a good card in our deck. I think we're in blue artifacts here. So yeah, Reality Heist would probably make the cut. It just doesn't have potential on its own, so and they go around late. Like there's a possibility, even this being pick 4, it could come all the way back to us. Maybe. Not in white. Low potential. Flying makes it better. This is kind of a ninja deck card. Right, this is like a tempo play. It has a slow clock on its own. It is an artifact, but like I would run the Cyber Trespassers over the Network Disruptor because it has more impact on the board and it's, you know, got higher potential to win the game by itself. Modern Age. This isn't bad. It's also not that exciting. It's like a 2-power flyer. It comes down 2 turns later. You get some card filtering out of it first. It's okay. Dokuchi Shadow Walker. Could come in with ninjutsu if you manage to do it that way. And it's like a 5/5 with haste for 4 mana at the cost of one of your other creatures. The potential of one of your other creatures, I mean, it's like a tempo setback. But getting a 5/5 with haste for 4 that connects with the opponent is probably worth it to bounce one of your creatures. If you don't do it, then it's fair. Right? 5/5 for 6 is a fair card. It's just fine. Not exciting. So if you ninja this in, then it's kind of amazing. If you don't ninja it in, then it's playable. It's okay. You know, win by turn 10. Otherwise, you know, if you ninja it in, it could be like win by turn 7? Yeah. Oh, actually, I kind of like this. I kind of like it, now that I'm thinking about the clock on it. No potential, no potential. Square deal. Geothermal Kami. 4/3 for 4 mana. It's on rate, you know, on curve. Square deal at 4 mana. Might even get you some added value by bouncing an enchantment and gaining life. Even if it doesn't do that, totally fair card. Reasonable. Good potential. And Searchlight Companion, this would be more like a synergy play for this deck. Okay. So I think I actually like the Shadow Walker here. Starting to look like a lot of colors. Like a 4-color deck. If I end up being a 4-color deck, I should maybe prioritize another Terrarium or two, or the Network Terminal. You can tap for any color of mana. But yeah, I'm going to take the Shadow Walker here. Okay, Prosperous Thief is pretty good if you ninjutsu it in. Right? If you get this as a like 3/2 kind of with haste at the cost of bouncing a creature, then it's above rate. Get a treasure token that accelerates your tempo, right? Your mana, your plays. Unlocks the potential of your other cards with that tempo. It's very good in that case. If you don't play it that way, it's fair. It's a 3/2 for 3, that's a fair card, not exciting. I'm not really setting this up to be a ninja deck, so I don't know that I can unlock that aspect of it. Ooh, another Koi. That's pretty good. Completion is strong removal. Very strong removal. Oh, is what I need another Koi or a Network Terminal? Synthesizer could be good here, except that red is looking like a splash color. I don't want to run 1-drops in my splash color. So, Synthesizer's probably not getting in here. Let's take a look at our colors real quick. Blue. Looks like blue is the strong one. The other 3's all just kind of could be anything. Okay. I mean, Koi does seem really nice. Can I pick up the Network Terminals late here? Seems a little risky, but oh, Koi's so good. I'm gonna take that Sky Swimmer Koi. Okay, Anchor to Reality. It's starting to look a little better and a little better, right? Now we've got Futurist Sentinel that we could pull out of the deck. We still got the Centipede. Still have the Familiar. So, a little better, a little better. Maybe not quite there yet. Awakened Awareness. This is a weird piece of removal. I think I'm going to be heavy enough in blue that I could run this. Can also buff up your own creature, which would modify it. It's not the worst. It's funky though. Removal, card advantage. Kami. I'm starting to get some power up at the top end of my curve. You know, I've got like the Stokuchi, I've got Kairi, I've got the Kami, the Kois, the Sentinel. I feel like the top end of the curve is starting to fill out a little bit now. So, let's see. I don't think I'm ready to take an Anchor to Reality or an Awakened Awareness quite yet. I think I'm going to take this Searchlight Companion, and I'll keep helping to turn on these Patchwork Automatons, give me, you know, something to do on turn 3. And then, you know, if I've got some equipment, you know, Chainflail Centipede laying around, I can buff up a token, get in for 3 damage. Seems okay. Whoa, Colossal Sky Turtle. Okay. 6 power flyer. Ward 2. Can be a tempo play to bounce a creature. Could also, you know, save something of yours. Can also regrow any card from your graveyard to your hand. It does those at instant speed if it's in your hand. Or you can play it as a 6 power Ward 2 flyer for 7. And that would deal 18 damage by turn 10. So, not the best clock, not the worst clock either, and really hard to stop and target. Kind of like Kairi. Not as good as Kairi, but you can channel it earlier in the game. So it's got flexibility. Kind of like it. Kind of like it. Top end of the deck's looking okay, though. Might be more of a, you know, a play to do with the channel ability. Guardians of Oboro. This would be a nice 3-drop on our curve. So, if we modify this, and we have ways to modify it, we do. We've got Invigorating Hot Spring, we've got pieces of equipment, put a counter on it from the terrarium. We have some ways to modify this. Then it would be above rate as a 3-4 for 3. And even if we didn't, it would also have the functionality of crewing the Futurist Sentinel. Not a dead card in our deck at all. See, I mean, I think Sky Turtle's a more threatening card overall. I think a 6/5 Ward 2 flyer is really hard to stop. But you also have to respect the mana curve as well. You have to have early game plays in the game. You can't completely ignore tempo. And sometimes you want to take the lower mana card that has high potential. You want to prioritize it over the high mana card that has high potential. So I'm looking at these Guardians. Let's see what else is in the pack. Decisions, just a trick. Torment, no. Gift of Wrath. This isn't the worst in terms of potential. It's like a 2-power menace with haste in terms of the damage it deals. But it buffs up one of your other creatures, which means that it's really hard to stop because it's larger now and they have to block it with 2 things. And if all of that, doesn't work, they kill your creature, at least it leaves behind a 2/2 spirit with menace. So it replaces itself as an aura. I don't love auras, but I think this one is okay. Not amazing, but I think it's okay. I think it's playable. There's the Ogre, and I could consider it here. Red's kind of a splash here, though. I mean, this is an artifact. The Guardians are not an artifact. But I think a 3/4, in a lot of cases, is sometimes better than a 4/1. Right, this can make something unable to block the turn it comes down. But over a long game, we modify these Guardians, and they're going to be kind of the more effective attacker than the Ogre is. The Ogre works with artifact synergies. So there's a little bit of a toss-up there. Also, Network Terminal is throwing its hat into the ring. So, you got some choices here. I'd say it's between Terminal, Ogre, the Guardians, and the Sky Turtle. Let's see, if we are making a 4-color deck, and it looks like we are, Terminal's going to be really good. Really good. It is an artifact. And the artifact would play well as a turn 3 play for the Automaton. I think I'm going to go with the Guardians here, though. This is risky. This is a risky pick. I think the Terminal is the safe pick in this case. But I'm going to go with the Guardians here. It fills a good spot on our mana curve, and it's got high potential if we modify it. Yeah, I'm taking some big risks this time. Here we go. Guardians of Oboro. Reality Heist. Still looking pretty good. Still got a bunch of artifacts. I'll keep a salvage. I don't love things that get something back from your graveyard in limited. If they have a high enough upside, they're okay. I mean, they're always kind of okay. But I don't love it. You have to have something in your graveyard for this to do anything. Don't like counter spells, especially like double blue requirement. Do like the Dokuchi. Do like it. It's expensive though. I also like the Tales of Master Sashiro. Okay, we've got a little bit of a modify theme going in this deck. Taking the Guardians, I need to respect that. And this fills another spot on the mana curve, right? The only thing we've got right now at 5 is the Kami of Industry. Tails is a strong card. Could modify our Guardians for us. This is good. I think we take it here. Okay, not taking white cards. Ooh, Thundersteel Colossus. Okay. Yep. Probably going to make the cut anyway. Can make that blue card playable. Oh man, Ironhoof Boar? I don't know if we need more 6-drops though. Man, we got some good stuff at the top of the curve already. Yeah, I think here we're actually between the Iron Apprentice and the Papercraft Decoy. It is nice to be able to find something that you can play for 1 in Limited. Most things that cost 1 are not worth your time. The Papercraft Decoy... I mean, the Iron Apprentice might be able to pass its power and toughness on to another creature, which is neat. Papercraft Decoy is a little bit more of a threat on its own. I like the chance of being able to draw a card. You won't necessarily be able to do it all the time, but sometimes you can. They both would play well with the Oni Cold Anvil. It's kind of a tough choice, but I think the Papercraft Decoy is more of a presence on the battlefield, generally speaking. Don't get me wrong, this Ironhoof Boar is great. But, we got some good stuff up at the top end right now. I want to make sure we've got good playables at the lower mana costs. Okay, we got a Shrine, and we got a Crab. A Shrine, and a Crab. I think we could use more 3-drops. Don't get me, I like Mirror Shell Crab. I think it's playable. People have used it against me to pretty good effect. But I'm going to take the Shrine here. Just kind of fill out the mana curve a little bit. Okay. Now we're all the way down to either a kind of an iffy 1-drop, because we're not samurai. I mean, sorry, ninjas. We're not ninjas. Or this card draw spell, which can cost less than 7 for the number of artifacts we have. We do have artifacts. Or Cyber Trespassers, which is a reasonable but forgettable either 4-drop tempo play or 5-drop critter. I think the top end of our deck is looking pretty solid. I think we have things to do for, 4 and 5 mana. And if I'm going to take another big play, especially one that might get down to, like, a cheap amount of mana late in the game, so it could double spell, I think I'm going to take the Reality Heist here, and it's probably going to make the main deck. Okay, I'll take the Commune. Probably won't make it in. There, see? Super, super late. Anchor to Reality. There is every possibility this is going to make our final deck. Right? We have got a Thundersteel Colossus to fetch out with it. We could even potentially have an Oni Cold Anvil on the field for when we sacrifice an artifact. So yeah. This can go on the sideboard. Okay. Farewell is a very powerful card. It's a very powerful bomb. However, we're not playing white, and Farewell does not actually possess any potential on its own. I might, if I was in white, I might take it anyway. It's a very powerful board reset. It's also selective, where you can, exile some things but not others. So it can be one-sided. But I'm not in white, and this is double white. So, not doing it. Bronzeplate Boar is quite good. This is a nice 3-drop. It's a piece of equipment. Something you could fetch out with Anchor to Reality. Yeah, man, this is not bad. Capitech Wrecker's not bad either. 1/3 Death Toucher's a good, early game blocker. Hoverbike. Hoverbike's interesting. Yeah, it's like an early game play. You can tap something down, right? It has flash, so you can like tap down an attacker on their turn, and you can like get this little flyer that attacks on your turn. It's not terrible. Not terrible at all. Some white cards. Trespassers is okay. I think we've got better choices up here at Uncommon. Nezumi Blade Blesser could very well be a Death Touch Menacer in our deck. It could. But I would rather choose more artifacts for artifact synergies for the automatons. Archer's a good blocker. Man, another Heir of the Ancient Fang. Huh. Huh. Well, maybe this will table back to us. Maybe we can take this when the pack comes back around. I'd love a farewell for the collection on this account, but I'm going to take the Bronze Plate Boar for the deck. I think it synergizes nicely. Helps us modify things. Okay. Thief's okay. Silencers, pretty meh. So, it's actually hard to discard a creature card to destroy a creature or a planeswalker of the opponent's and have him hit with ninjutsu. It's a lot of hoops to jump through, and then it's it's like you've got this guy out, and then you also discard a card to blow up the thing. It's still like a one-for-one trade of cards. It's just hard to pull off. Modern Age is kind of, so-so. Kami's alright, Ogre's alright. Geothermal's alright. Okay, this is not the best pack for us. Let's see. So the Thief could make treasure tokens. That doesn't trigger the automaton, though. It's when you cast an artifact spell. We could sack them to the anvil, though. That would be nice. That would be very nice. Could also sack it to Anchor to Reality. Use him to cast all the funky colors of mana we got in the deck. Yeah. Prosperous Thief, it's not the worst. There's at least a more than 0 chance that we could ninjutsu it. Even though we're not built to do that. Let's see, we could also take like an Ogre here. 3 drops are starting to get pretty thick, though. Geothermal Kami works better with enchantments. It could return this Invigorating Hot Spring back to our hand, which would be pretty amazing. Gain 3 life, reset the counters on the Hot Spring. Would be pretty amazing. Could also reset Azuz's Many Journeys for, a little bit of value. Gain another 3 life. I mean, that's mainly it. It could also reset Tales of Master Sashiro, I suppose. So yeah, Geothermal Kami is fine in our deck. We've got a few good targets for it. It's not really exciting, but it's okay. I think since blue is our primary color, maybe we go with the Thief here. We could also take the Modern Age. This could help us like hit our colors. Kind of like smooth out the deck a little bit. That wouldn't be the worst either. It would for sure be a 2-mana play, whereas this is not for sure a 2-mana play. It doesn't work with the artifact synergies as well as the thief does, though. Hard choice. I'm gonna take the thief. Okay, not in white. Don't really need... Let's actually cost 1 less for each modified creature you control. Huh. Huh. Am I a walking skyscraper deck? They got a lot of modified stuff going on. Maybe I'm a walking skyscraper deck. This koi would be pretty good. We got a lot of 4-drops though. Sling is a nice little piece of equipment. Oh man, Artificer wouldn't be the worst. You know what? I think I'm going to take this walking skyscraper. I think I can cast it for a lot less than 8 mana. I know I'm being pretty optimistic, but sometimes it takes a little optimism. No potential. It's for a ninja deck, really. Don't have a lot of ninjas. It'd be okay as a 2-mana play on turn 2. But the mana's not the easiest. Sentinel's good. Let's see, works with a modified theme. Also works with a modified theme. Ogre is an artifact. Actually, I like the Sentinel here. I think we're going big, folks. I think we are going big. Okay. Merge Keeper we could play on to, and it would ramp us up into our crazy late game. So I kind of like it as a synergy play. Bronze Cudgels is an artifact. Could play it just for that reason. I think I like the mana production more. Yeah, I think we're going to take the Merge Keeper here. Yeah, if it's modified, it makes even more mana. Ooh, there's the Sentinel again. There's the Sentinel again. It was a nice play after an automaton on turn 2. Crab, probably don't need. We've got a huge top end on this deck. And Shrine Steward, we do have at least a shrine. I don't know if there's any auras. The short circuit's probably not making it in. Yeah, I think I take the Sentinel here. It's good with the automatons. And we actually have the Guardians of Oboro, so it's not impossible that this could attack. Born to drive. Okay, Reality Heist. Do I already have one? Yeah. Might not take a second one. Airship Crab. Oh, Artificer. Artificer's like a good blocker. Could accelerate our mana for artifacts, and we do have artifacts. Have some activated abilities, too. Yeah. Get a 2-drop. Oh, hey, Familiar. I like Familiar. It's a pretty good one. Song Shaper. I mean, Song Shaper would be okay. Red's, not that big of a presence in the deck. Blue is kind of the stronger color, so as 2-drops go, I think I'd rather have the Armor Card Familiar. Harmonious Emergence is actually a pretty powerful card, but synergy-wise, I think we're taking this Familiar. Okay. There's that Heir of the Ancient Fang. I mean, we don't have a ton of 5-drops. It's playable, but I feel like we've got a heck of a strong modified theme going on. I think we can play these airs. Okay. I don't think Kami would be the worst as another 5-drop. It might get cut in the final version of this deck. We've got so many playables. Kami's probably the stronger card overall. I mean, the geothermal. Industry has more synergy with our artifacts. It'd be really cool to pick up an Invigorating Hot Spring. We've got a lot of 4-drops. Let's see, yeah, 3 Sky Swimmer Kois, man. 2 Featureless Sentinels, and an Anchor to Reality that can get a Thundersteel Colossus. I guess we don't really need another 4-drop, and maybe there's a chance that this 5-drop makes it in? Okay, Automated Artificer, I think it's got a good shot at making it in. I probably wouldn't play the Shattered States. I'll take the Ogre, it probably gets cut. Bronze Cudgels is an artifact, we'll take it. I mean, another Ogre. Sideboard. Okay, so I ended up, you know, I didn't prioritize taking some of those network terminals, and it's come back to bite me. So now I've got this crazy pile, and I have to decide what to do with it. It's obvious just from a glance that black is a splash in the deck. So as nice as Oni Cold Anvil is, making your mana incredibly shaky by going into 4 colors, it's not necessarily what you want to do. This Shadow Walker, if we don't ninjutsu it, would be double black. The Centipede is nice, but not that nice. And that leaves us with the Anvil. And I don't know, as good as the Anvil is, as good as it is, I don't know that it's worth, you know, upsetting the apple cart, kind of ruining our mana base for this one card. So I'm going to cut it here. Okay, so now we're down to 3 colors. So how good is green? Tails is a strong card. The airs are good if we modify them. Hot Springs is a very strong card. Orochi's kind of filler. Azusa's is maybe filler. Commune's maybe filler. Okay. So if green ends up as a splash, then we don't need the green mana from this Merge Keeper. And if green ends up as a splash, then we can't rely on it to fix our mana with this Commune with Spirits. Now, these other cards have a lot of value packed into them, so we're going to hold for a second there. Definitely want the Terrarium. It's going to help fix mana for any color. Let's see. Cut the Cudgels for a minute, it's not that great of a card. I'm going to cut a Kami of Industry. It's okay. I'm just going to cut it down to 1 copy right now. We'll see where we get to. I like the 1 of Anchor to Reality because it can pull out Thundersteel Colossus. We are primary in blue, so double blue is not too big of a deal. I like the skyscraper. We have modified creatures that we can do. I don't love the ogres. Yeah, I don't think I love the ogres here. See, I'm going to cut an ogre. I'm going to cut a planar incision for now. We could get it back in the deck if we need to. Like the familiars. Like the artificers. Like the automatons. Let's see, Thief feels like it's a little bit of a filler card here. We don't have a good way to turn on ninjas. Getting treasure tokens would be nice, but I think I'm going to go ahead and cut it for now. We've still got a lot of 3s. Goshintai, I think, is maybe kind of a filler card. We don't have any other shrines. I think I can cut it here. Okay, we're getting down to things that have pretty strong synergies for the deck. So I think some of the lower mana value cards are better than this Kami of Industry. I'm going to cut it back. Reality Heist, I think, is useful in this deck, but we might be able to get a win without having to rely on card advantage. I'm going to cut the Reality Heist for now. I think we leave the other top-end things in. I think the Kois stay in. I like the Sentinels. I like the Anchor. Okay, so we need to cut stuff that's kind of filler here. Zeus's Many Journeys is a fine card, but it doesn't have any artifact synergies, and I think I'm going to cut it. Really like the Hot Springs and the Airs. Not going to be hard to get a modified creature in this deck at all. Ogre feels kind of filler to me. Maybe the Searchlight Companions are kind of filler? Maybe they are. They don't do a great job at crewing the Sentinel. I mean, it does give, you know, something to sack to the Anchor to reality. We've got some things like the Terrarium, or, you know, we could even give up like an Artificer in order to get out a Thundersteel Colossus. There are trades like that I'm willing to make with some of the early artifacts. Maybe I cut something at the 4-drop slot here. Do I cut a Koi? Do I cut a Koi? Man, that's a tough question. I mean, I need two more cuts here. Okay, Sky Swimmer Koi works with artifacts, but it's not an artifact itself. Okay, I'm gonna cut one. And I guess a Searchlight Companion? I think that's the deck. Okay, we got a funky modified artifact deck here. I managed to cut it down to 3 colors. So, red and green are, you know, kind of splashes, but they're kind of big splashes. The Terrarium is going to help us find the mana that we need. We're going to run 17 lands, so we have more sources. And we're primary in blue. So yeah, join me in part 2. I'm going to take this crazy concoction that I've built out onto, you know, quick draft, play against some real players, and see how we do. So until next time, stay cool.